What is the real reason that the Broncos lost this game to the Colts yesterday? This is your Denver Sports Daily for September 15th.
The biggest stories, the latest news. It's Denver Sports Daily.
I think that I speak for everybody when I say, what the hell just happened? I cannot believe that game yesterday against the Colts ended the way that it did. And trust me, I will talk about the way that it ended, but there is not one singular reason why the Broncos lost this game, and definitely not one penalty flag that caused the Broncos to lose this game. Sure, on paper and in the stat line and however you look at it, it might be one penalty that ended up actually losing the game, but there's a lot more to it than just a yellow towel being thrown in the air. There is more to the reasons why the Broncos lost. First of all, the Broncos held the lead all the way from the 8-minute mark in the first quarter until time expired in the fourth. You cannot lose a game when you have the lead for the entirety of the game. That's just not how you can play football. You can't hold the lead for the entirety of the game and then go out there and play, kind of half and half. We're fine keeping the lead, whatever. And then you end up losing on a field goal as time expires. That's a story that happens to a team every once in a while. And it just happened to happen to the Broncos yesterday. That cannot fly. That cannot fly. And that is a coaching issue. Whenever there's a problem like that, it's a coaching issue. If you're holding the lead for the entirety of the game, but you still end up losing on a last-second field goal, then your coach did not do a good enough job protecting the ball, keeping it in the offense's hands, and keeping it out of the other team's hands to let them come back into the game. Now, the good news is, somewhat good news, Bo Nix looked better. He looked more like his true self. He completed 22 of 30 passes. He threw for 3 touchdowns, and he added 20 yards on 3 carries. So, Bo Nix playing like Bo Nix. But tell me if I'm wrong here. I might be just spitballing. Bo Nix didn't look like he was going out there to win the game. He looked like he was going out there to throw a couple touchdowns. That's what I saw from Bo Nix. And that may seem weird. That may seem like, oh yeah, touchdowns lead to winning games. Yeah. Bo Nix didn't look like he was playing the game that Coach Payton wanted. And you could see that they were kind of getting into it on the sideline. There was a video that came out of that. So Bo Nix was playing all right, but he clearly disagreed with some of the calls. He wasn't playing the same way he played last year. And that's kind of the thing that we've come to expect here from this season. We come into a new season expecting you to pick up from where you left off last year. And that has not been the case for this Broncos team. You win by 8 points against a terrible, terrible Tennessee team. And then you lose on a last-second field goal to the Indianapolis Colts led by Daniel Jones. And I'm not hating on Daniel Jones. In fact, I'll do the opposite. Daniel Jones looks like a true quarterback in this league. But still, Daniel Jones, before the season, him and Bo Nix wouldn't be in the same conversation at all. And now it's looking like they aren't. It's looking like that's true. They aren't. It looks like Daniel Jones is the better quarterback. That's the way that it looked after yesterday's game. Now, the run game, as well as the passing for the Broncos, was consistent, but consistent isn't good enough. J.K. Dobbins led the team with 76 yards on 14 carries. He was averaging about 5.5 yards per carry. That's what you want to see from J.K. Dobbins. That's what he's done for his career. He got a touchdown too. But 14 carries for a guy averaging 5 yards a carry, that's not enough. Get him over 100 yards. He's already got a touchdown. Continue with that. And he had a really boneheaded decision where he spiked the ball. But spiking the ball for a 5-yard penalty, that's not going to lose you a game. Penalties happen. Mistakes happen. That's not going to lose you a game singly. That one thing didn't cause the Broncos to lose. And I feel like a lot of people were going out there getting mad at J.K. Dobbins because he spiked the ball. And as dumb as it was, that's not the reason that the Broncos lost. The main reason that the Broncos lost was because of the defense. The defensive side of the ball for the Broncos was nothing close to what it was last year. The Broncos defense looked garbage. They looked really, really bad. They allowed Indianapolis to score on 6 of their 8 drives. You allowed them to have 28 or 29 points. You can't do that against the Indianapolis Colts. This is a team that you beat last year. And they got Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones. Again, Daniel Jones looks like a better quarterback, but the Broncos defense is rated as the best defense in the league. They should have had a field day, but they didn't. And you know why? because Daniel Jones and Jonathan Taylor were doing whatever they wanted to do with the ball through the air. Daniel Jones completed 23 of 34 passes for 316 yards and a touchdown. And not only that, he added a rushing touchdown, which led to Jonathan Taylor, who had 165 yards on the ground on 25 carries and then 50 yards through the air with a receiving touchdown. They were slicing up the Broncos, hitting them in the mouth. It was terrible. Terrible. The Broncos were just dominated on the ground and through the air by Daniel Jones. That's what allowed them to hang in there until the final play of the game. Now, the Broncos were held scoreless in the fourth quarter. That's another reason why they lost. They had 2 drives in the fourth. One ended with an interception, and the other ended with a missed field goal. The interception was thrown in field goal range. You can't do that. You hit a field goal there, and you end up most likely winning the game because then you force the Colts to go for a touchdown. And if you could have held them out of the end zone for another drive, maybe we're talking about a win here. But instead, an interception is thrown, which was a terrible mistake from Bo Nix. And then you go out there on your next drive, you get into field goal range, and Will Lutz misses the field goal. As bad as it gets. As bad as it gets. Now, of course, you got to talk about how the game ended. The game finished with a missed kick that would have won the game for the Broncos. However, leverage. That was the call that was made that allowed the Colts to attempt the kick again, which led to them winning the game. I could say a lot about that call. You can call a flag on every single play in the NFL. You can call holding on every single play, defensive PI, offensive PI. You can throw the flag on every single play in the NFL. That is not a moment where you throw a flag. You allow the players to go out there and play the game. Now, what I will say is that if that leverage led to that player who did it, I forget who it actually was, led to them blocking the kick, that's fair. I would say that that's fair that you can throw the flag there. You can't throw the flag when there's a leverage call that's completely out of the play. It didn't affect anything at all. It didn't affect anything. And it ended up costing the Broncos the win. It's a poor mistake, and you practice things like that all week. You know what the fouls are, the flags are. You know what the penalties are. Why would you make a boneheaded mistake like that when the clock is running out? And sure, it didn't really change the game at all. He didn't end up blocking the kick. You can't throw the flag at that. But yeah, made a mistake, and the refs saw it, and they called it. Now, I'd never heard of leverage before. I've never heard of it. So yeah, I think it's a dumb call, but a call's a call. I'm much more for referees letting the teams play, but that's what happens when you make mistakes and the refs see it, and that's just how it is. You end up losing on a terrible call, a bad decision, and overall a bad game. But the leverage call wasn't necessarily the reason they lost. Maybe on paper, maybe on the stat sheet and on the play-by-play, there was a bad call and they allowed them to re-kick and you ended up winning the game. But what led to the Colts winning the game was the poor performance from the defense and the inability to score when you needed to in the fourth quarter for the Broncos. A poor win, or a poor loss, and the Broncos start their season 1-1. Really unfortunate. And now they've got a tough couple weeks ahead of them. It only gets harder from here. If they can't beat the Colts, then they're going to have a really hard time with the Bengals, Eagles, and Chargers coming up in the next 3 weeks. Now, moving on, the CU Buffs were dominated by Houston. It was a really bad week for Colorado. The Ryan Staub experiment blew up in Coach Prime's face as Houston dominated the Buffs, winning 36-20. Ryan Staub completed 19 of his 35 passes for 204 yards and a touchdown, but he added 2 interceptions and 2 fumbles, so 4 turnovers coming from one guy, that one guy being the third-string QB last week, coming and getting the starting spot and then not able to capitalize on that position. Now, the Buffs got punched in the mouth by Houston's run game. Dean Connors, their running back, ran for 89 yards and a touchdown, and then Connor Weigman, forgive me if I mispronounced that, ran for 83 yards and 2 touchdowns while also throwing for 222 yards. So just complete dominance on their offensive side of the football over the Buffs' defensive side of the ball. The QB room, though, for the Buffs, that's where the topic of conversation is going to be. That's a mess. It is a mess, to say the least. I can't imagine what that room is looking like right now. There is far too much confusion in that room. And at this point, Prime needs to pick a QB. That's got to be the starter, and you got to rely on Julian Lewis to continue developing. You can't add any more QBs into the mix, it's only going to make things worse. And worse is hard because the Buffs are now 1-2 and have fallen to 0-1 in the conference after losing their first Big 12 matchup. A real unfortunate weekend in Colorado sports. I mean, you get a loss from the Broncos and you get a loss from the Buffs. I mean, how can it get any worse? The worst. But I do want to read some of your comments. Bo has reached his ceiling. That's a hot take. I mean, Bo didn't have the worst game yesterday. I can't blame it too much on Bo. He had a really bad interception late in the game, in field goal range. But other than that, come on, like Bo's a second-year starter. He really hasn't had all that much time to develop. We haven't seen his ceiling yet. It's far too early to say that this is his ceiling. If we're going to blame the refs or penalties, then this team is nowhere near a good team. I actually do agree with that. I agree with that. You cannot continue to blame refs every time there's a bad mistake. And that's what I was saying. There was a terrible mistake made in the end of the game, but that is not the reason why the Broncos ended up losing. They lost this game because of their defense and their inability to stop the ball as soon as it got in the Colts' hands. I mean, they allowed them to score on 6 of their 8 drives. Crazy. Good morning, Joey. Good morning, Roy. Thanks for joining. Really bad play, blown coverages, penalties, turnovers. The list goes on. It was nasty. It was ugly to watch. It wasn't good football. You weren't watching good football. And you watch a game all the way around. You watch the Eagles and Chiefs. The Eagles play good football. You know, they are secure with the ball. They know how to play. They're always very stout on the lines. They're not getting dumb penalties. The Broncos were acting like a young team yesterday. They were acting, immature on a lot of these things. Penalties, coverages were blown. Of course, turnovers late in the game. It was really poor all the way around. No way that losses on those players, those high-paid players got to play better. For sure. I mean, you got Nick Bonito, just signed him to a massive contract, and nobody's able to stop the run. I mean, it was really poor all the way around. I mean, how many times can I say poor? But these guys were out there playing like young guys who didn't know what they were doing. It was overall just a bad performance for the Broncos. Now, that'll do it for your Denver Sports Daily. I'll be back with you guys again tomorrow. Of course, this week we're going to be previewing the next upcoming matchup for the Broncos. Will they be able to start hot, or get back on track is what I should probably say. But they have a tough couple weeks coming up. And I said last week, if they lost this game, there's a very real possibility that we see the Broncos start the season with a 1-4 record. And that looks like it may come to fruition. Now, that'll do it for your Denver Sports Daily. I'll be back with you guys again tomorrow. Until then, y'all have a great rest of your day, and I will see you all later. Bye, y'all.